The federal Liberals continue to be tested on two of their core signature policies, the carbon tax and their $10 a day childcare program. Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson said today there's lots of talk among Liberals about rebranding the carbon rebate, following reports that Canadians are confused about how the carbon pricing system works.
I don't want to get out in front of my friend and colleague Minister Guilbeault, but I think we've been certainly thinking about how can we communicate better.
They can lower the cost of food, of gas, of home heating by canceling the increase instead of quadrupling the tax.
What Canadians need to know is these Conservatives would cut childcare, they would cut dental care, and they would cut the carbon rebate people are getting.
Okay, meanwhile, some childcare centres across Alberta began rolling closures today to protest the $10 a day program created by the provincial government and the federal government. Now, the provincial minister responsible says he has concerns about the level of funding coming from the feds.
This is a concern that I know that we are facing here in the province of Alberta, just to make sure that the federal government realizes the true cost of childcare and is willing to come to the table and help support that ongoing investment that they started a couple years ago.
This afternoon, Alberta Premier Daniel Smith called for a meeting with Ottawa over the funding levels. We're going to talk about all of this with the Power Panel. Michelle Cadario is a former Liberal campaign director. Kate Harrison is a Conservative political analyst. Matthew Dubé, a former NDP MP. And Emily Nicolas, a columnist with Le Devoir. Michelle, so on this, the Liberals have been making pretty clear they would like to fight Pierre Poilievre on climate change and on the threat that the Conservatives represent, in their words, to the $10 a day childcare program. How do these two challenges laid out today by what's happening in Alberta, concerns by groups like the YMCA in Ontario about daycare, what kind of challenges does that present for the government going forward on this?
It's an opportunity, actually, because, once again, and I say that because we had similar agreements with the daycare program, many moons ago, but they have agreements with all the provinces. People want $10 a day daycare. People who have children appreciate that childcare is actually somewhat affordable, and it's a great economic tool to allow both parents, if there are two, or single parents, to be able to get into the workforce. So we need that if we're desperate for workers and we want to keep our economy going along. It seems like there's a small group of childcare centers, as I understand it, in Alberta that are having some issues. I hope that Alberta and Canada can have a constructive conversation, which is, it's a rare policy that they actually are working on together. I hope that we would all encourage that. And it's very popular across the country for people with child age kids. So, I think it's an opportunity. And, Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, as I understand it, don't think that there should be this childcare program. So, Canadians are going to decide whether it's worth it or not.
Kate, do you see this as something the Liberals can work to their advantage? I know the YMCA and others have expressed concern about the pace of the remittance, from the provincial government. I don't know if that's a Queen's Park problem or a House of Commons problem. It's unclear to me. But it hasn't been a super smooth rollout in two of these provinces.
Yeah, I think it's showing some cracks in the foundation, and I don't think that it's a problem that can be fixed without throwing a lot more money at it. And Chrystia Freeland pretty firmly closed that door over the weekend. I think for both the carbon tax and the child care policy, these are really foundational marquee policies of this government. Yep. We are now seeing, now that they've been in place for some time, some issues in terms of how it's been rolling out. And these groups have been raising concern for a long time. There were critics of the CWALK program well before, the last 48 hours. But now that parents are dealing with potential closures, they're starting to ask some questions too. So I think, when you're looking at this from a narrative and a brand perspective, these aren't things that are necessarily going to be fixed by putting a new slogan on it or calling it something different. This is bad policy coming back to haunt the government, and some of the challenges that were raised by critics at the outset of this are coming back to haunt the government, and especially on the issue of childcare. $10 a day is great. I'm sure, to Michelle's point, lots of people want it. But if you can't access it, or your daycare has a rolling closure, or they can't pay to do anything else at the daycare because they don't have the funds, that $10 a day is not going to mean much to parents if they can't actually access that care.
So, Matthew, on the rebranding conversation about the carbon rebate and how to better frame carbon pricing, or pollution pricing, as the Liberals call it, the carbon tax, as others call it, Can that fix the challenge here? I know there's been a lot of criticism of Liberal comms and Liberal messaging and that may hold true writ large. But on this particular issue, is this a policy that just needs a polish?
I think they need to figure out what to do with it for sure. I mean, I think, unfortunately, on the framing of it, I think the train left the station the minute it was called a carbon tax. I mean, the minute you're using the word tax, it's going to be a challenge for sure. I also think, I was thinking this a couple weeks ago when we talked about this topic as well, where when you're talking about an issue where how it's labeled on your direct deposit is actually part of the conversation, I think that tells you how so far deep down the rabbit hole we are on like what the challenges are with this. And I mean, and I'm not saying that negatively about the fact that we are talking about it. I just mean like it just shows you how broken a lot of it is. And I think it's time to have a bit of an adult conversation about, you know, where it's going to apply, where are there going to be exemptions, how is that all going to work out? And I just don't think that the tone on either side right now lends itself at all to doing that, because I think it's more than just a communications issue. I think it's, you know, it's the applicability, it's squaring it with affordability, the perception. I think even the rebates, they've lost the plot a little bit because it's implying that you're getting refunded for something, right? Which also, you know, the government's not going to like me saying this. I just say the public perception leads the impression that you're being compensated for something that you've lost, that you're paying elsewhere. And so I think that also presents a challenge. It's not just a check that people are getting and they walk away happy, right? If they're thinking that they're paying elsewhere at that cost. So a lot of challenges. I don't know what the answers are, but here we are, like, you know, half a year removed from a cabinet shuffle, still talking about how to communicate better. It doesn't seem like they're making much progress.
Emily, is there any way to sort of change the conversation about the carbon pricing policy and the rebate? Because you know, most people think of taxes as the price you pay for services and the price you pay, you know, for you know, a resilient country and all of these things. This is a tax designed to change behavior, married with a rebate. So it functions differently, and it's designed to function differently than the GST and income tax. Is there a way, as they keep saying, to communicate it better and explain it better? Or is this too far gone?
I think it is too far gone at this point if they don't reset. And by reset, I don't mean a cabinet shuffle. I think there needs to be some sort of a sense that is instilled into both the political class and just Canadian citizens as well, of just the environment as being a crisis and having crisis-style communication around it. And making sure that people understand that this policy is part of an emergency response, basically, to the climate crisis, and making sure that people understand the stake. And then when you do that, you re-explain your policy. You make your mea culpa on certain things if you need to. You redesign some of it if you need to. But the idea that this is just some policy that people are scrubbing over, you know, how much do I pay for this and that? With the big issue that's being lost there is why we're doing all this. And I think that's the issue that we've had since last summer. It's not just the cabinet shuffle, it's the fires that we've had last summer. And that point has been completely lost in this conversation. Why is it that carbon is even an issue in Canada? I think that's the main issue there. And I would say the same thing as well for the issue about daycare. We've had similar programs in Quebec for, you know, almost 20 years right now, 15 years. And the result of that has been, we're seeing the statistics in terms of women's ability in Quebec to be able to participate to the job market. We're seeing the result in terms of basically women's freedom. And so then if that is an issue, and if the well-being of children is the issue, and that everybody across party lines is supposed to be caring about, then you figure out provincially, federally, what the issue is in terms of policy application, policy design. But the goal here is being lost, and it's just becoming a conversation about, you know, for-profit daycare versus non-for-profit daycare and how much money on the table, and we lose sight of what this is for. Basically, parents' ability to be independent, and especially women's ability to be independent. That's been completely lost on this conversation, and it allows for partisan game that is done at the detriment of women and at the detriment of mothers and at the detriment of children as well.
So Michelle, you saw opportunity in the childcare challenges for the Liberals. Where's the opportunity for them on the carbon rebate rebrand that they're talking about? Because Pierre Poilievre is making this the centerpiece of his campaign. So it's not like an issue they can shove aside. He even promises to axe the tax in places like British Columbia, where it's a provincial price on carbon and not a federal price on carbon. So like nothing's going to change there. What is the opportunity for them on this? Is there one?
Well, where he's got a simple slogan, I think the Liberals have a much too complex design of a program. But they're on the right side of the issue. And yeah, in BC, we've had a carbon tax for 15 years. And you know what? It was the BC Liberals, so the center-right party that brought it in because it was the right thing to do, because it was making the market be a factor in terms of how carbon was used and how you could actually reduce a carbon footprint. Supposedly that's a conservative ideal, is to let the market kind of dictate some of that stuff. Now, that's not to say it's been perfect. The fact that I think there was this poll that 45% of Canadians who are eligible to get the rebate don't even know it, or they don't even know they're getting it. Problem. They have to, so there is a communications component, but there also probably has to be a little bit of a step back and to look at potentially the escalation and just the pricing, particularly at a time when families are really struggling. They've opened the door on one rebate or on the home heating fuels in Atlantic Canada, which kind of created a bit of a Me Too across the provinces for other forms. So, I think that they have to pick their lane and they have to stick to it. But that doesn't mean that they can't refine it.
So, Kate, here's something I struggle with. I notice when I get my rebate, because a family of four, it's almost $300. Like, when $300 shows up in your bank account, you notice. Especially when we talk about how hard everybody has it. How do people not know when potentially hundreds of dollars show up in their bank account a couple of times a year? If things really are that tight and it's that expensive, it feels like this would resonate. Because
it doesn't offset how much more you are paying as a result of the carbon tax on your groceries and on your home heating. Like the price of everything.
It does, though.
I have a family of four as well, and certainly our weekly cost of groceries our monthly cost has probably gone up about $300 in the last year. So I think it's a drop in the bucket, and I think if the question of branding is really just a classic kind of Trudeau liberal way of looking at this problem. This is a flawed policy. And there was a while not too long ago where there was a consensus that carbon pricing was absolutely what we needed to do and the tax was the best way to go about it. And Pierre Poilievre has disrupted that conversation by saying, no, I'm going to get rid of it. And what the data I see that Abacus produced shows is that Canadians aren't as sold on this as I think there was an assumption being made that there was in the past by this particular government.
Well, in good economic times, there's lots of support for it, right?
Absolutely.
Because your extra $300 a month is not all carbon tax. That's inflation. That's global food supply shocks. That's everything. So it's the totality of the affordability crisis that's outweighing it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I think that's right. But at the same time, it's the Conservatives have been effective in linking those price increases on your everyday products to the carbon tax. So even if you're promised a rebate, it doesn't help offset those other costs that are rising.
Okay. Gang, we're out of time, but I want to thank you for being here with me tonight. Michelle Cadario, Kate Harrison, Matthew Dubé, and Emily Nicola. Thanks so much.